Alright, so we're back in the world of Space Marines 2, and it's time to talk about the Assault. One of the biggest discussions I'm seeing happening in the Reddit, as well as just on tier lists and videos, is that the Assault is by far the weakest character in the entire game. Leading into the launch of this game, I started off with the Assault and maxed him first, getting him all the way to 25, finishing all the content on Ruthless, and wanted to see what this character had to bring to the table because, to be quite frank, I thought he was one of the coolest characters to be in the game, wielding a really awesome hammer, a pistol, and just flying around all over the place. It was really cool, and it's a character that I really want to be very good. Now, for clarity, I do want to start off by saying I do like the character. He is capable of completing every bit of content in the game, but he is by far fundamentally the worst character in the game. I know a lot of you are a big fan of him and are emotionally invested in the character, but just keep in mind the purpose of this video isn't really to kind of crap on the character, but to point out his weaknesses in hopes to maybe have a discussion. Maybe Saber sees it and try to maybe get some benefits going his way, so he becomes that aerial hammer powerhouse melee that a lot of us come to expect from the Assault. Now, first off, before we can even give suggestions on how to possibly fix the Assault, let's talk about his major problems. I think there's like 3 core problems with him that needs to be addressed to get him in a good place. The first being the fact that he is a character, in my opinion, that is supposed to be very heavily melee focused, but in my opinion, characters like the Vanguard and the Bulwark does melee quite a bit better. This is for a couple of reasons, one being the fact that after he does his aerial dive, he is actually really vulnerable. If you don't take a perk that makes it so you can't be knocked back whenever you do your heavy hits, you don't really have a lot to bring to the table to keep you in the fray. On top of this, when it comes to his hammer itself, it's very slow, has a really long wind up, and outside of one move, the initial run jump, it doesn't really stagger. There are multiple characters like the Bulwark, for example, who has this really large, very fast weapon that does a lot of stagger on his basic attacks, and he can kind of stand his ground despite having one of the most tankiest kits. The Assault, a character that puts himself in consistent danger, actually doesn't have as much stagger on his hammer, and he has really long windups, making him super vulnerable. So what this means is you inherently have a very highly mobile character that puts himself in danger, but in a lot of cases, outside of blowing another jump pack charge, which is very scarce, he actually doesn't really have a way to fight once he's in that said danger, like many of the other characters who actually put themselves willingly in danger, like the Vanguard, because he lacked perks that actually benefits him quite heavily. The next big problem with the Assault is the actual usability of his jump pack. Outside of building him a very specific way, it's not necessarily has the most uptime, and it tends to be a little hard to actually get the benefits, and even when you do have the perfect setup, it's not necessarily easy to keep the uptime of his jetpack up. This is even more so exaggerated when you face off against the Chaos. The Chaos, for example, has a ton of tanky mobs that can teleport quite a bit, does some really reasonable range damage, and just straight up outpace you by quite a large margin, despite you having a jetpack when they can just teleport away. Obviously, the Assault has a much better matchup against the bugs, but when it comes to the Chaos, it feels near impossible, because what the Assault does really well is slamming down against multiple hordes and groups of enemies to get his charge back, so he can continue to do it, and the Chaos actually counter this really well by simply spacing themselves really well, being a ranged threat that can teleport quite a bit, and just being a really tough matchup that I don't think the Assault can actually deal with really well. This is not even taking into account their sorcerers who can kind of fly and avoid a lot of your attacks, and the more tankier guy, the bruiser guy, I forget what his name is, can just outpace you with his attacks before you can even get them off, again making him really hard to actually do melee as a melee focused character. The last and final problem with him is his core fundamental design. Outside of his jetpack, he doesn't really have much to go, as to where something like, let's say for the Bulwark, when he doesn't have his flag, he has really good AoE damage pressure with synergies with his shock and awe, dropping areas of damage, his capstone perk giving him the ability to drop his lightning, and he actually gets a lot of synergy with his AoEs, and he can continuously do AoE damage despite not having his banner up, as to where, for example, the Assault AoE damage is tied behind this really long windup that can be easily staggered, making his uptime on damage not good. Couple this with the fact that a good portion of his perks is very pistol focused, which is very strange, and again, he doesn't have any perks that actually makes him be able to stand his ground, which makes the Assault a character that has very very low uptime on his jetpack unless he has the perfect situation. Not necessarily a great melee fighter, and a kit that in my opinion just doesn't work really well with himself. These are the core fundamental problems with the Assault that needs to be addressed. Now for my first proposed change is going to be pretty simple. Give him the Melta rifle. The Melta rifle is by far the best weapon in the game. I'm joking, guys. I'm just messing with you. I know you guys are going to tilt off the planet for me saying that. I see it in my comments nearly every single day when I make a video about the Melta. I know you guys hate it. I'm just messing with you. In all seriousness though, there are a few changes we need to make. The first will be giving him better synergies with his Assault pack. I think changing some perks like the one that gives him recharge would be actually really big. Buffing that would be the most easiest way. Instead of being 10%, make it 15%. It'll be like 7 kills will be able to recharge a pack. That'll make his uptime much better. I don't love that solution because it makes players want to take it more than the others. So that's a okay solution, somewhat band-aid, but could be a good option. Another thing could be the very similar route that the Auspex scan has. When you have the ability, like whenever you scan a extremist or higher level enemy, it recharges it by 50%. You can do something very similar to that. Whenever you hit an enemy with your like Assault mode, it could be like Majorist or higher, you'll recharge 25% of it and make it so you have a higher uptime. You don't necessarily need to kill but hit. This will give you that more Assault feel, which would be really good in my opinion. Other obvious thing could just be give him another charge. I went into the campaign and thought what I was going to see in the campaign was going to be something I saw in the operations. I was very sadly mistaken to believe that. That would be really nice to give him another third charge, but I feel like if we make his boosting much better, I think he would be a lot better of a character. I would even argue taking away some of that like gun strike stuff and more focused towards survivability would actually help him quite a bit. I think for his hammer, it would be nice if the hammer inherently just had more stagger overall. Again, the Bulwark has his power sword that can kind of just throw things around from hitting him. I think a slower weapon like the Thunder Hammer should be more than capable of doing the same. He's way more vulnerable using it. He's almost always in more like dangerous positions. So in my opinion, he should be having the ability to have that level of poise. I understand the core design of that weapon to be an AoE killer, but I don't think the trade-off is worth it. And in a lot of cases, you actually lose a lot more trying to use it the way it's intended. The other thing could be his class perk. I don't think he needs the dodge window. I don't think it's necessary. I think it would be much better if he had just inherent higher base damage against some of the tankier enemies. I think he does really well at killing the minorest enemies. I think he actually struggles against the tougher guys. Give him an inherent like 20% damage increase against those enemies would actually be pretty good. I'm not sure about that number. That may be too high. It could be specifically to his jump pack. It doesn't have to be just him. It'll be tied to the perk anyway. So something like that could really help. Ultimately, it's very obvious that he needs something to make him a lot better, and I think those proposed changes are something to start off of, and in my opinion can actually make him a much more viable character, instantly catapulting him into the A tier. And if they give him a Melta, he obviously would be a S tier. Joking, but you know, it'll be true. Anyways, that's gonna be it for my rant when it comes to Assault. Let me know down in the comments what you think about this like proposal. I know a lot of people may be in denial that the character is not the worst. It very clearly is, but yeah, let me know what you guys think. Don't forget to drop that like as well as subscribe to the channel for more Space Marines and variety content coming up on the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video very soon.